Welcome to Nicolas Cage National Pleasure, the place for all your Nic Cage needs. I'm going to discuss every aspect of Nic Cage's life here, and of course we will dive into his films, but it's more than that. For anyone out there that's somehow not a huge Nic Cage fan, which first of all, shame on you, I'll explain. Let's say the topic is his film Pig. Well, of course we will talk about the movie Pig, but then we will dive into the world of pigs themselves. I'll talk about fun facts about pigs, etc., and I'll share any stories I may have about pigs. We will learn about the world around us through the lens of Nicolas Cage. He is the foundation for this bizarrely unique Cage-centric channel that's going to be all over the place, much like the man himself. We will explore the myths of Nic Cage, all the bizarre Nic Cage stories that are floating around there on the internet that cover a wide variety of topics: haunted houses, superheroes, mimes, and much more. So it's going to be a fun ride. It's for the hardcore Nic Cage fans, but also for anyone that appreciates the weird in general. And we're going to learn a lot. And, of course, I will keep you updated with the latest in Nic Cage news, along with some other fun segments. And, of course, the ultimate goal is to eventually have the man himself, Nic Cage, on here for an interview. And, at the end, I will trade faces with him in the final episode. I mean, how could you go beyond that? Like, if that happened, I would have to just end there. There's no better way to go out. All right, for the first episode, we are going to discuss the time Nicolas Cage took mushrooms with his cat. Yeah, you heard me right. This is a true story straight from the man himself. This was right out of his mouth during an appearance on David Letterman, which I used to love as a kid. Still, I think, the best talk show host ever. The story kind of came out of nowhere. Letterman asks him, Nicolas Cage, if he ever drank beer in high school. And Nick says, no, but he did remember having a bag of mushrooms in his refrigerator. And he had a cat that would sneak into the fridge and steal the mushrooms. His cat's name was Louis. He told his cat, Louis, you don't do that. That's not right. But the cat ate them voraciously. He loved them. It was like catnip to him. So he thought, what the heck, I better do it with him. And he remembered lying in his bed for hours, and Louis was on a desk across from his bed for hours, and they were staring at each other, not moving. Louis would occasionally meow, and he said he had no doubt that he was my brother, his cat. That's what he's talking about there. All right, that's a quick story, but it's a lot to take in. Let's break it down. Now, first of all, in the clip, the video itself, I just have to point out that we all know that Nic Cage is the man of 1,000 looks, and in this particular interview, he was sporting a goatee with slick back hair. Just thought I had to throw it out there. It's just weird. You never know what look you're going to get when you see Nic Cage in an interview, or, you know, if they snap photos of him on the street or whatever. I'm sure the look was for an upcoming movie, but who knows. 2, the cat's name, Louis. I love it. Who doesn't love a good human name for a pet? Louis is so perfect. This just makes me love Nic Cage even more. Like, it makes him more endearing. I didn't know that was possible. Now, my questions for you, and feel free to comment. Please do. Subscribe, comment, all that stuff. Let's get this thing moving. We're going to have a lot of fun, you guys. Do you think he was on the same trip with his cat? Were they riding the same wave? I do feel like when you take mushrooms in a group, you do tend to pick up on the vibe of the group. You all start to psychedelically sync up. And I feel like animals surely pick up on our energy. Like, there's no denying that. So I could easily see them sharing a trip. Obviously, they have very different perspectives, though. He's Nic freaking Cage, and his cat is a cat, so who knows? Maybe his cat was like, I can't believe I'm tripping with Nic Cage, you know? Who knows what a cat thinks about when it trips, really? Maybe they're more in tune with the universe. I mean, mushrooms strip away our ego when we take them, and animals don't really have an ego to begin with. So maybe they get to the secrets of the universe even more quickly. I mean, I wish I could take mushrooms and see what a cat sees in a trip, for reals. Now, the thought of Nic Cage on mushrooms is already bizarre enough, but I love that this story was with his cat. Nic Cage already gives off a tripping vibe, even when he's sober. And the idea of him on psychedelics is just incredible to me. It's like Nic Cage squared, which is awesome to think about. After hearing this story, it's actually now a life goal of mine to eat mushrooms and trip with Nic Cage and his cat Lewis. Imagine how fun that would be. We did get a glimpse into what it would be like to trip with Nic Cage in The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. I love that scene, by the way. Him tripping with Pedro Pascal. They took acid, though. And by the way, tripping with Pedro Pascal is a close second behind Nic Cage as far as who I would want to do some psychedelics with. That scene is amazing, but I felt it was even a bit underplayed because Nic Cage on acid seems like quite the adventure. Like, it seems like it would be really intense. And, with that movie, to keep the plot going and all that, I know they had to kind of move on, but man, I would watch a movie just about Nic Cage tripping. That'd be fantastic. It's just crazy to think about what kind of realizations Nic Cage would have on acid or mushrooms or whatever. He already has such a unique point of view. I can't imagine his thoughts on overdrive with psychedelics. That's awesome. Nic Cage seems like the kind of guy that did psychedelics a little too much at some point, or currently still. Maybe that's where his unique perspective comes from. A lot of people think he's a really weird guy. Maybe he's broken through on another plane, Now I will share some personal stories regarding tripping with an animal. This is the part where we talk about the subject that Nicolas Cage brought us to, mushrooms. I do have a few stories. I've got a lot of stories, actually, but, I'll keep them to the highlights. My wife and I have an amazing dog named Penny. You can follow her on Instagram. She has like 40,000 followers. The handle is @theluckiestpenny. One time, my wife and I were tripping, and we lived in a small apartment at the time, and our dog Penny brings 3 toys to my feet, and she lines them up perfectly at my feet, and I look at these 3 toys, and something clicked in me, and I freaked out. I was like, oh my God, Penny is communicating with me. This is amazing. And I thought if I turned the toys a certain way, I could communicate back. And in that moment, I literally thought I had broken some sort of barrier between the gap in communication between dog and man. Something that man has wanted to do since the dawn of time is talk to their dog, know exactly what they're saying. And in this moment, I thought I had done that. I thought I was about to communicate back with her. And right about then, my wife has no idea this is going on in my head. She comes over, collects all 3 toys, and throws them across the room for our dog to chase, to play. She was just playing with her. And I screamed. I was like, no! I was so upset because it had just ruined my research, And I was like, oh no. And she was like, why are you so upset? I was like, that was about research. And my wife's like, what are you talking about? I was like, I don't remember. If you've done a lot of mushrooms, you know how that feels. Here's another one. At that same place, we had eaten mushrooms one time. We were really far gone at this point. And my wife and I were very hungry, but we didn't want to go anywhere. And we didn't want to I didn't even want to call into a restaurant because I didn't want to talk to people. That's how far gone I was. And eventually I thought I had thought up a perfect way to avoid all of it, but to get food. I was like, I've got it. My wife's like, what? And I was like, what if we just write on a piece of paper, mac and cheese, and we tuck it under our dog's collar, and then we just send her to the restaurant around the corner, and they'll just give her mac and cheese. And my wife did not shoot it down. We were so far gone. She was like, that's genius. We have a smart dog. She'll totally do that. And then a little bit later, we realized that is insane. That would not have worked at all. How would she carry the food back? There's a lot of holes in this idea. We're just so tripping. And eventually we figured that out and just started laughing hysterically at how dumb we were. One time I was tripping and saw a commercial for an air conditioning, a local commercial for an air conditioning company that would come out and fix your air conditioner. And there's a guy with a long mustache that I thought was God. And I emailed the company. I found this out the next day when I was sober. I had emailed the company to ask if the man in the mustache was God. So that was interesting. One time, my wife and I were walking along, and my wife saw a rock, and she was like, "That rock reminds me of this one painting." And she described the painting. She's like, "You remember that painting we saw at one time?" I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "Let me take a picture of the rock." Like, she didn't have her phone on her, I did. And I was like, it was real cold. It was like snowing, and I just wanted to get inside. I was like, "Oh, you don't need to take the picture of the rock. It's not going to turn out like you see it right now on psychedelics." And she's like, "No, I will." And I was like, "Trust me, it won't. That's never worked. You can't take a picture of your hallucination, you know?" And she finally just grabs my phone out of my pocket, takes a picture of the rock, and then drops my phone on the rock, shattering my phone, destroying my phone. And so eventually, like, I have to get, my phone didn't work. I had to go get a new phone. And then that picture came up through the cloud or whatever as soon as I got a new phone. And I was like, "Oh, we finally get to see this picture of the rock." And I was like, it did not look like the hallucination. It just looked like a rock. $1,000 picture of a rock. I read an article for this episode on the concept of mushrooms at weddings, which has become a little bit of a trend. And I would like to share a snippet of that for you now. It said this woman that was interviewed for the article was talking about doing it for the first time at this wedding. This is what she had to say. She said, "I was a little nervous. I wasn't really sure how much I was going to be able to retain my faculties on mushrooms at a family wedding. But then as soon as they started to kick in, I realized that it was going to be totally fine, and it just became incredibly fun. I remember dancing and just feeling so awake and alive. Everything was sort of glowy and the lights were so beautiful, and I just felt like I really love my cousins and my family so much." She goes on, "I just remember feeling exactly the way they tell you you're gonna feel on mushrooms, just connected to the universe, which sounds so silly when you say it when you're not high, but just feeling my heart beating at the same rhythm as the stars were pulsing." She then went on to say, "I think it should be at every wedding and every celebration. It should be at baby showers." I don't disagree. And I guess the point of reading this, how is this not legal? Like, it's crazy to me. Like, alcohol is way more dangerous. I'm not saying I'm not saying everyone should do it. I'm not saying it's even always fun. I've had a lot of bad trips. But even the bad trips, in the end, you've learned something. And again, be responsible if you do it. Always go easy if you're doing it for the first time. You can always add on. You can't take away from what you've already done. So be careful out there. Again, all I'm saying is alcohol is just way worse for you than this. A drug that makes you feel more connected to the universe and drops your ego, and it's helped a ton with my depression and anxiety. I just can't believe it's illegal. Let's change it. Let's get Nic Cage to do that. Nick, come on. Let's make some changes. All right. Back to what brought us here. Nic Cage, the guy that inadvertently took us on our psychedelic trip today. Time for a Face Off 2 update. Now, I read a headline recently that freaked me out because the headline made it sound like there's bad news for Face Off 2. But this is basically what it explained. The WGA strike delayed production. So that was the bad news. It was just a delay. But as of now, it is still happening. And Nic Cage and Travolta are back for the sequel. Also, Adam Wingard, who directed Godzilla vs. Kong, will direct the Face Off sequel. And he made it clear that it will be a direct sequel and not a reboot. So that is awesome news. So exciting. I really hope that this comes together. These things fall apart all the time. But right now it's on track. It just might be a little bit. Now, what's crazy about all of this, I'm sure there's a lot of you thinking right now, but Castor Troy's shot by a harpoon at the end. I watched it last night, and that does happen. He is shot with a harpoon. How is there a sequel? Well, this is a world in which people can literally trade faces, so I'm not too worried about that. Let's not get lost in the woods about that. The thought of a Face-Off 2 decades later is seriously so exciting. All right, guys, it's time for our final segment. What is Nic Cage doing right now? That's right. This is just something I like to think about every now and then. He's just such a unique individual that it seems almost impossible to predict what he might be doing at any given moment. And when I do think about it, it makes me giggle, and it's oddly grounding. It's like meditative. If I'm kind of anxious or something, it's fun to just picture what is Nic Cage doing right now. So, this is what I think Nic Cage is doing right now. I think he's sculpting 80s sitcom actress Judith Light of Who's the Boss fame out of some sticks and mud while he sings hymnals to dozens of pet sugar gliders, all named after George Foreman, while he listens to the full musical inventory of Fleetwood Mac. That's what I think he's doing right now. God, wouldn't it be great if I nailed it? And we read an article that said that's what he was doing yesterday. Oh, please let it happen. Well, if we make enough guesses, it could happen. So, I guess this begs the question, what do you think he's doing right now? Please leave that in the comments if you'd like. And that's it for our first episode. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, comment, share it, tell a friend. And tell me, again, what you think Nic Cage might be up to, or what a Nic Cage psychedelic trip would be like, or if you've ever eaten mushrooms with a cat. And again, thank you, and see you next time. Who knows where Nicolas Cage will take us next?